So wouldn't you believe it, but I was scrolling through Twitter just a couple days ago, and I found an account popped up in my feed. Somebody that I follow had retweeted them, and I was kind of shocked and pleasantly surprised because this kind of works exactly as I was hoping. My idea is that I'm going to be kind of redoing my who might become the next Pope video and releasing it around when the next consistory happens, which would be August the 27th, so mark your calendars, I suppose. I haven't recorded it yet, and this might change it, because what I saw on Twitter was an account, and the ad account is Pope_predictor, so if you want to follow them on Twitter, if you have a Twitter, you can do that, otherwise known as Papability Index. And this is exactly the sort of thing that I'm kind of into, and especially kind of going in that having that previous video, this is the sorts of things that I'm always kind of looking for to kind of inform my own views and to kind of figure out what might be likely. So highly recommend. I'll put the info in the description so that if you want, you can check out this account. I'll just read the description. Who's going to be the next pope? I have an algorithm that ranks cardinals according to the likelihood they'll be the next pontiff. What an interesting concept, really revolutionary. I think in one of their tweets, they kind of go over some of the things that go into account for how they rank their cardinals, and this is kind of just a completely off the cuff video. I'm not kind of going in here with anything super scripted, so if anything comes up, these are some of the factors that they list as taking into account in this sort of algorithm. Age, seniority, the pope who elevated them to cardinal, the length of their cardinalate, their home country, their involvement in scandal, rank, etc. These are some of the things that I also take into account when I made my list. Not that makes any huge impact, but it is interesting to see how people can kind of come to different conclusions with some of the same evidence. And somebody asked later on, how accurate is the Papability Index? And out of the last 5 papal elections, 2 were kind of spot on completely. They totally aimed it, but those might have been the most obvious elections, which would have been Pope Benedict and Pope Paul VI. However, based on their rating, they also gave a very high score to John Paul II in what would have been the algorithm for the 1978 papal conclave. So I think that's very interesting. And so they've kind of put out, I think monthly now, it seems, for the past 3 months, they've kind of put out a list on the top 10 cardinals today based on their analysis. And so on this next slide here, we'll take a look and we'll see some of these. I think the top 4 on mine are featured on here, which would be well, I guess I have to spoil it anyways, but Cardinal Tagle, Cardinal Ulay, Cardinal Turkson, and Cardinal Parolin, I believe, are my kind of top 4. And we can kind of skip over them a little bit because I'll give them greater explanation in my video, but I just kind of wanted to look at some of these other options here and kind of consider, who are these people maybe, and not a great amount of detail, but just kind of looking at their names, who they are. I think probably the biggest standout for who's kind of a household name per se might be Cardinal Schomborn in that number 8 position. If I recall correctly, I think I either have him as a possibility or I might have even have nixed him. I think Cardinal Schomborn has certainly been around for a long time as far as cardinals go, and he hasn't really had a breakthrough. Obviously, he's never become the Pope, which isn't to say that he can't become the Pope, and he certainly represents being very well connected and being very well known, and certainly he's ranked very highly on here. I guess I won't give too much of an opinion. One thing that really surprised me when I saw this, though, was the positioning of Cardinal Lacroix. Canada, of course, has 4 cardinals, and I think it's very interesting to note that, out of all people to make this top 10, 2 of them are from the same country, which I think is it was very surprising to me, and it's probably very surprising to a lot of people. I hadn't thought of Cardinal Lacroix as somebody who should even really be in consideration. He's about the same age range as Cardinal Tagle, and I mean, really, I guess you have to kind of look at him. He's basically like Cardinal Ulay, but younger, in that he's literally assumed kind of all the same positions that Cardinal Ulay had, which is very interesting, and maybe that kind of plays into why he's ranked so highly. I guess we'll go down from here. Cardinal Solorzano. I know him by a different name, I guess, which is I think it's Leopoldo Jose Brenes, and he's a Nicaraguan cardinal. I think I had kind of heard about him maybe in the mid 2010s. I'd heard about him a little bit more. From my very vague understanding, it seems that there is some sort of, not super great dynamic between the Nicaraguan government or Nicaragua and the Catholic Church. And Cardinal Solorzano has certainly seemed somebody who seems fairly competent and a good sort of fellow, although obviously he's not making breaking news every single day. Perhaps that's a good thing for some cardinals, right? Going down the list now, we have Cardinal Erdo from Hungary. By all accounts, he also seems to be another very solid pick, coming from these kind of former Soviet states, and kind of dealing with that. It's kind of almost sort of John Paul II, second coming, if you will. Not to say that most European cardinals wouldn't have dealt with that sort of upbringing, but he's certainly coming from behind the Iron Curtain in the same way that John Paul II did. Kind of has that sort of he's faced living Catholicism in a very unpopular kind of anti-Catholic setting, so to speak. Cardinal Turkson, we'll elaborate on later. Cardinal Bozanic, the rest of the cardinals, actually, I'm not too familiar with. Bozanic, I think he's a Croatian cardinal, but otherwise, on all accounts, seems to be fairly solid. And then Cardinal Tempesta, I think the thing that interested me the most about him was that he's a former abbot. He's a Cistercian, which I thought was very cool. Usually you don't think too much, I guess, of these candidates nowadays, I guess, being from these religious orders. Certainly very much in the past, it was very much the case that a lot of the time you'd have these long streaks of religious order, usually because of the place and the work that these orders were doing in the church. So when the Benedictines come around, we see lots of, Benedictine popes and derivatives of the Benedictine order, and so on through history. The Jesuits have now, I guess, finally caught up with Pope Francis. So this was kind of the interesting thing to me. I think 3 of these cardinals were made cardinals at the same time. It might even be 4, but I think it was Cardinal Lacroix, Cardinal Solorzano, and Cardinal Tempesta were all made cardinals in 2014 at the same consistory, which I thought was, very cool. That there's kind of there's this high-ranking or high possibility clique that's kind of formed out of that one particular conclave in 2014. Otherwise, I just kind of wanted to make this as a little quick video, see what people thought. This will kind of this might impact what I was thinking, actually, because I think the inclusion of Cardinal Solorzano is kind of something that slipped behind my radar and something that I might want to reevaluate going forward on my listing. And certainly a lot of good can be said for many of these cardinals. So that's all that I've got for today. Hope you're doing well. Of course, look forward to my big revamped video coming out on August 27th. Otherwise, take care. Bye-bye.